In July of 2016, eBay officially banned the sale of human skulls. You might be shocked to hear that they ever allowed the sale of human skulls to begin with. Or maybe you saw my video on that old Real Human Bones Tumblr story. Then you know that the sale of human bones is mostly illegal in the US. You can literally go buy a real human skull right now as you watch this video. Ultimately, eBay changed their policy not because they are compelled legally, but due to ethical concerns that were raised with them after a study suggested that many of the skulls for sale were actually stolen. Some of them might have been sourced from archaeological digs, and others might have gotten there through straight up grave robbing. And they said that allowing sales like this on a site as big as eBay actively encouraged more grave robbing. If you check eBay's rules today, they now have a human parts policy. It bans the sale of human bodies, body parts, and products made from the human body, with an exception made for human hair wigs. The gruesome twosome would be pleased. But eBay's been around since 1995. That's 3 decades ago, and a lot can happen in 3 decades. You probably won't be surprised to hear that eBay has a long storied history with the sale of human body parts, functional organs for transplants, celebrity brain matter, pieces of serial killers. You name it, someone sold it. So for today's video, let's take a look at some of the most notorious cases of human body parts sold on eBay. This video is sponsored by Helix. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding custom fit to your needs and shipped straight to your door. Everyone sleeps differently, so Helix has you take a sleep quiz to match your body type and sleep preferences. I'm a side sleeper, so Helix set me up with the Sunset mattress. The Helix lineup offers 20 unique mattresses, including their award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections, the Helix Plus, a mattress designed for big and tall sleepers, and the Helix Kids mattress, designed for growing bodies and endorsed by child sleep and medical experts. Helix delivers your mattress right to your door with free shipping in the US. It comes rolled up in a box and it's easy to set up. And make sure you love your Helix mattress. There's a 100 night sleep trial. You also get a 10-year warranty as well as financing options and flexible payment plans. And Helix mattresses are fiberglass free. I've been sleeping on Helix mattresses for a couple years now, and it's some of the best sleep I've gotten. Helix's best of web sale is running right now for a limited time. They're offering you guys an exclusive discount this month. 27% off your mattress purchase plus 2 free pillows. Just go to helixsleep.com/wang or click the link in the description. As one of the first e-commerce sites ever and one of the very few to survive the bursting of the .com bubble, it should be no surprise that the eBay of 2025 is kind of a safe, sterile version of what it once was. Like, yeah, you still got people trying to sell Cheetos that look like dicks for thousands of dollars, but that site really used to be the Wild West. Like, I remember one time Matt from Dinosaur Dracula on his old website X Entertainment. He did this post where he dug some dirt from his backyard and put it in a jar. Then he poses it for a picture with a bunch of tarot cards. And he sells it on eBay as a magic kit. And someone actually bought it for 20 bucks. I probably saw that post like close to 25 years ago. I remember it just solidifying in my brain that, oh, eBay is not a serious website. But stuff like that would absolutely not fly today. And don't get me wrong, that makes it a much better place to buy and sell things. But it still kind of sucks to see that the soul of eBay is long gone. In fact, you can't even buy a soul on there anymore. Okay, technically you were never actually allowed to buy a soul, but there was at least one major case of such an auction falling through the cracks all the way back in 2001. A 20-year-old from Seattle named Adam Bertle listed his soul on eBay, which he described as hardly used. Although it was eBay's policy to delete listings like this as soon as they found them, this one actually somehow made it all the way to the end. His ex-girlfriend starts things off with a bid of $6.66, and it gets all the way up to $56 by the end. And as still usually happens on eBay, in the closing moments, people went crazy sniping the auction, and ultimately, Adam Bertle's soul was awarded to a woman in Iowa for $400. I hope Bart Simpson realizes how bad Milhouse screwed him. Of course, Adam Bertle never actually expected someone across the country to actually buy his soul for $400, so he had no idea how to actually fulfill his end of the bargain. He told the Seattle Times, "I was just bored, and I'm a geek. So anytime I'm bored, I go back to my internet." eBay suspended his account, and a representative said, "You have to have a piece of merchandise that a seller can deliver to a buyer." And in another similar case reported by Business Insider, eBay got a little more philosophical with their answer. eBay does not allow the auctioning of human souls for the following reasons. If the soul does not exist, eBay could not allow the auctioning of the soul because there would be nothing to sell. However, if the soul does exist, then, in accordance with eBay's policy on human parts and remains, we would not allow the auctioning of human souls. The ban on body parts would be continually tested throughout the site's history. A very common early example was kidneys. One of the early examples of this was widely reported in August of 1999. A user named HC Hero made a listing that read, "Fully functional kidney for sale. You can choose either kidney. Buyer pays all transplant and medical costs. Of course, only one for sale, as I need the other one to live. Serious bids only." As was the case with Adam Bertle's story, although these auctions usually got shut down as soon as they are found, this one also managed to slip through the cracks. Bids started at $25,000, and they made it all the way up to $5.7 million before getting pulled, with eBay, of course, citing its ban on human body parts. However, unlike in a lot of cases where eBay was simply making a judgment call, it actually is illegal to sell your own kidney. Which frankly, I mean, that's a little messed up, in my opinion. I have to give my kidney away for free, and meanwhile, that kidney goes into the system and everyone else who touches it gets fabulously wealthy. I know when I say this, I sound like the toaster license guy, but I should be able to make money off my own damn kidneys. Think about it, that'd be the best piece of YouTuber merch ever. Although the auction got pulled, it did spawn a lot of imitators, including a bunch that were archived by whattheheck.com. One was made by a user named Cam Curtis who tried to skirt the laws with a little clever wording. "Will donate perfectly healthy kidney for a reciprocal donation of $2.5 million to a charity of my choice. Please call and leave message. Absolutely serious inquiries, please. Kidney recipient to pay all medical expenses for both parties." Oh yeah, what was this supposed charity? The Human Fund? People also tried listing other organs, like say, a testicle. Or as he put it, "one healthy testy for trade." Seriously. Starts at $500,000. Yeah, dog, I don't think you're ever getting $500,000 for your ball. I don't think they were paying that much when they were buying women's ovaries off of Craigslist. Oh yeah, and of course, a penis. Just like John Bobbitt, who you might remember from Saving Val Venus from Kyantai fame. My wife has cut off my penis for cheating on her. I've put it on ice. The doctors tell me it is still operational. I have decided to go with a smaller penis. So I am selling this one. It is 11 inches long when erect, with no warts or any other kind of VD. Feel free to ask for a scan. I think like when you first read this listing, you're thinking like a CAT scan or like, you know, some of those like X-ray type things. But considering the time period, I literally think he meant he's gonna stick his dick in a scanner and fucking... Understand that this is a pre-phone camera world. Starts at $25,000. For this guy is giving away his entire meat for a fraction of that guy's one ball. These guys cutting their dicks off and selling them. It's almost as unreasonable as the retro game. What do these guys think this is? The retro games market? Come on, bro. It's just a testicle. It's not like you're selling a complete new in-box Earthbound for Super Nintendo. Despite all these auctions obviously being very silly, it surprisingly did inspire a lot of conversation about the logistics of making such a deal, the state of organ donations in the country, and just internet law in general. A lot of the coverage noted that eBay at the time actually had no system for dealing with this. They relied entirely on user reports, and if something didn't get reported, they just wouldn't see it. Time magazine said, with close to 6 million users posting to the site, the company says there's no way to stay on top of every listing, and if the company tried, it could be liable for anything that got through. It's really interesting to see an assessment like that in 1999, because at that point in time, we hadn't really gotten the laws that allowed for sites like YouTube to be able to have content without being held responsible for every single thing put on there. So at this time, people really weren't sure, what would happen in that case. And I remember not that long ago, I think it was in Europe, they were having some kind of law debated that would essentially screw websites over like that. Something where companies would be held for everything their users post. And it would even extend to search engines. I don't remember what it was called. But it's 1999, so barely anything's codified at this point, people are just making guesses. And while a lot of this was very obviously just jokes, a lot of healthcare professionals did take the opportunity to express concern about the state of organ donations. The LA Times noted that at the time, there were 42,907 patients in the US waiting for a kidney donation. And according to the National Kidney Foundation, that number now in 2025 is up to 123,000. Of course, if you're wealthy enough, you're playing a completely different game. As one of the doctors that Time magazine spoke to noted, a person who can afford $5.7 million to buy a kidney on eBay probably has way better options. Although ostensibly those listings were for people who needed kidney transplants, another significant portion of sales like this on eBay were for memorabilia. The true crime junkies who watch this channel are probably familiar with the name Roy Norris. Along with Lawrence Bittaker, he was one of the serial killers known as the Toolbox Killers, named for the devices they used to torture teenage girls in the summer of 1979. After being caught, Norris pled guilty and would testify against Bittaker, who he felt manipulated him into participating in the murders. Although psychologists said that this was part of a pattern of shifting responsibility for his actions. Bittaker would get the death penalty while Norris got life with parole, although ultimately he would die behind bars in 2019. While in prison, like a lot of infamous murderers, Norris would often correspond with people in the outside world through the mail. Some of these messages would be sold through various auction outlets online, but perhaps the most interesting one was posted to eBay in July of 1999. Serial killer fingernails signed. Although the photos from this specific listing seem to be long gone, with a starting bid of $9.99, here's what you're getting. 3 of Roy's fingernails, affixed with a small piece of tape to a recycled card, the back of a portion of a color Christmas card, approximately 4 by 2.5 in size. He's penned a long note authenticating the nails, which fills half of the card. At bottom right, he's signed in full over a perfect right thumbprint, in black ink. Absolutely guaranteed authentic for life, or your money back. The nails would eventually wind up in the collection of a crime victims advocate, Andy Kahn of Houston, Texas. In an interview with local news station KHOU, Andy spoke about his efforts to stop what he calls murderabilia. He acquired the nails and a lot of similar items while investigating this phenomenon that he assumed was illegal. Although some laws have been passed in certain parts of the country, the practice still remains mostly legal. But in 2001, eBay banned the sight of most of this memorabilia, and in the wake of this rule change, several more sites like Murder Auction and Supernaut popped up. And here's a bunch of autographed nail clippings that I found on Supernaut. But in the grand scheme of things, serial killers are kind of small potatoes. What if we aimed a little bit higher? How about the body parts of a dictator? This is one that was actually shown to me by Wavy Web Surf somewhat recently. So in November of 2009, a listing was made by an anonymous eBay user. For the price of 15,000 euros, you could own the blood and brains of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. You might be asking, how does one come to acquire the blood and brains of Mussolini? On April 28th of 1945, Mussolini and his mistress were executed by firing squad. Their bodies were later brought to Piazzale Loreto, where the corpses were brutally beaten, spat on, and hanged by their feet. Afterwards, an autopsy was performed, and they determined that the bullets killed them. The hospital in Milan that performed the autopsy would later receive a letter from a psychiatrist in Washington, D.C., named Winfred Overholser. He wanted to study Mussolini's brain. But it's not like, he could just get the brain and trace the wrinkles and see what's going on there. It's because of a theory that he had something called general paresis, which is what happens when syphilis goes untreated and spreads to the brain. Some people believe that this could be an explanation for his behavior. So multiple samples of Mussolini's brain were sent to Overholser in Washington, D.C. After examining the brain, he determined that it was totally normal. There was no syphilis, he was just like that. After the research was done, it was said that these brain samples were disposed of. This, of course, was a lie. In the years following, there was talk around Washington, D.C. of an infamous Mussolini brain sample that was still floating around, but this was largely believed to be an urban legend. Then in 1955, reporter John McElway caught up with Winfred Overholser, and then Overholser would show him something. A glass vial labeled Mussolini brain. And inside was a chunk of organ tissue that the reporters said resembled chicken liver. Mussolini's body was returned to his wife 2 years later in 1957, but the body they received was missing the brain. So of course she started to demand that the brain also be returned to her. She pestered them about it for nearly a decade, and finally in 1966, she's handed an envelope from an American diplomat, and inside the envelope is chunks of Mussolini's brain, but they couldn't get it all. Overholser died in 1964, and nobody knew what happened to the sample that was in his possession. And then one day in 2009, an eBay auction supposedly pops up with a wooden box, and inside the wooden box are 3 glass vials of his blood and brains, supposedly sourced from the original autopsy at Policlinico Hospital in Milan, which of course would be the same source that Overholser got his. The auction remained up for a couple hours, but eBay was able to take it down before any bids were made. But it became international news after it received the attention of Mussolini's granddaughter, Alessandra Mussolini. In her younger days, Alessandra was an actress and a model who released a city pop album in Japan, but she decided to give up showbiz after being asked to change her name. And with that life behind her, she would go on to continue her grandfather's work as a politician in Italy. Ironically, the very moment that she found out about this eBay listing, she just happened to be at a conference on internet crime. So she immediately goes to talk to the police, and then she makes a statement to the press. Referring to her as a right-wing politician and former showgirl, the Telegraph quotes her as saying, "This is very serious. These are the kinds of things we have to guard against. She would go on to say that the police are on the case, and they've assured her that whoever made this eBay auction is going to be backtraced, the cyber police are going to get them, and consequences will never be the same. She was also certain that the source of the brain matter was, once again, Policlinico Hospital in Milan. Representatives of the hospital quickly responded. They said that the samples that they had of Mussolini's brain were destroyed a few years after the autopsy. Of course, a similar claim was made about Overholser's sample, and that was a lie. And if there was anything that someone was gonna lie about, it would be something like this. Like, the more I think about it, like really putting myself in that situation, there's just no way that someone was tasked with destroying one of the most famous chunks of brain to ever exist, and just destroying it. They definitely pocketed it. But despite being sure it came from the hospital in Milan, she also said that it might have been from Washington, D.C., or maybe it was just a lie. Boundary Stones, a website about local Washington, D.C. history, would look back into Dr. Overholser's sample in 2015, and they actually found some people debating over whether or not the Overholser sample ever actually existed. Officials had no problem finding the half of the brain slivers stored away at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, but when it came time to search for the sample once kept in Dr. Overholser's safe, the St. Elizabeth's staff was stupefied. It was nowhere to be found, nor did any record of it exist in the hospital documents. Some even doubted its presence at St. Elizabeth's at all. Dr. Solomon Katzenelbogen, director of research in 1945, recalled talk of the brain, but didn't remember ever seeing it. If it was studied, he claimed, the very meticulous pathologist on staff would have made a careful record, but others were sure of its existence. McElway testified that he had seen the brain, and St. Elizabeth's then superintendent, Dr. David Harris, confirmed that it had indeed traveled to the hospital for research. One thing that everyone agreed on was that its fate had been sealed with Dr. Overholser's death. It's possible that after he died, maybe the brain chunks went to family or someone otherwise close to him, but it's also just as likely that the brain was literally thrown in the garbage, as often happens when an old man dies. You know, maybe Overholser's sample is what wound up on eBay, or maybe it did come from Milan, but as far as I know, the Italian police never actually did manage to backtrace it. So we'll probably never really know if the sample of Mussolini's brain that went on eBay was real, and if so, where it actually came from. But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, turn on notifications, and check out my video about the old haunted painting that got sold on eBay. I'm out.